The day my husband and I took our daughter to the aquarium, our daughter got lost. My husband and I, along with the police, searched for her for years but to no avail. It wasn't until I received a distress call from my daughter, "Mom, save me. I'm about to be beaten to death by them." That's when I found out that my husband felt sorry for his first love who had become a widow. He was afraid that her son with Klinefelter syndrome super male wouldn't be able to find a wife in the future. So he sent our daughter to be a child bride for that boy. I was so angry that I trembled all over. I called the police and drove there at the same time. When I got there, I learned that my daughter had already been sexually assaulted and killed by that boy with Klinefelter syndrome. Cindy nestled in my husband's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "What should we do? My son can't go to jail." Just like that. In order to prevent me from calling the police and getting his first love son imprisoned, my husband and Cindy joined hands to kill me and buried me in the mountains. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my husband suggested going to the aquarium. In this life, they all deserve to die. One mom, why did you fall asleep? Were you too tired from work yesterday? I opened my eyes wearily and saw my still 12-year-old daughter standing in front of me. Without thinking, I hugged my precious daughter who I had thought I lost but now found again. So excited that I almost couldn't speak. "Why haven't you come to my dreams for so long? Are you blaming me for being useless? What are you talking about? Mom? If you don't feel well, I can skip going to the aquarium today. It's also good to rest at home." That's when I realized that the tears on my face were warm. This wasn't a dream. I pinched my thigh hard and opened my phone to find that I had actually gone back to the day my daughter was abducted. After calming down my emotions, I took her little hand. "Mom just had a nightmare. I dreamed that you and I got separated. But it's okay. We're together again now." "Okay. Mom. Don't worry. I definitely won't run around." My daughter didn't see the eyes full of overwhelming hatred that I hid behind her head. "My Grace is so good. Of course. She won't run around. There are other people who have truly committed the most heinous mistakes. And that person is my husband. The father of my 12-year-old daughter. Leo. Although even a tiger won't eat its own cubs, this beast has already lost the basic moral principles of being a human. After Leo married me, he neglected the management of the company and spent all his energy on holding his own art exhibitions. The day he suggested taking the child out to play, I foolishly had the illusion that this could be the beginning of the repair of the relationship between father and daughter. I knew that ever since I gave birth to Grace, he had disliked her for not being a boy. When I was in the confinement period, I once mocked him, asking if there was a throne in his family that needed to be inherited. But I never imagined that, in order to carry on the family line, he had a bastard child with his mistress outside, and even tried to sacrifice my Grace's life to clean up the mess for the other son with Klinefelter syndrome. The day Grace disappeared, I searched everywhere like a madwoman. But he just stayed in the car smoking as if nothing had happened. He made an excuse that there were too many people and Grace was disobedient and ran away and couldn't be found. But the aquarium was only that big. He didn't know that before this time. Grace had been to the aquarium many times and was so familiar with it that she could memorize the names of every kind of fish in it. The reason she wanted to come was just to experience the fatherly love that ordinary children are born with. The phone rang, and Leo was urging me on the other end. I added a bow to my daughter's head. "In this life, I will protect her well and let those dark bugs be trampled underfoot and rotten stink." 2. In the last life, just before my daughter died, she desperately called me. The melodious and gentle tone was broken. She was shouting on the other end, "Mom. It hurts so much. I really want to go home. I'm going to be beaten to death by him." But I could only hold the phone and cry anxiously and helplessly. Leo's mistress, Cindy, gave birth to a son with Klinefelter syndrome. During her pregnancy, she secretly contacted an unlicensed hospital to check the gender. Even though the prenatal examination showed there were problems, she still gave birth to this defective child. On one hand, she secretly envied that my daughter was treated like the apple of the eye at home. On the other hand, she worried that her son would have problems getting married in the future. So she came up with a bad idea and asked Leo to kidnap his own daughter for her son with Klinefelter syndrome to sexually assault. When Grace was found, her whole body was covered in injuries. And there was a depression on her head. And Cindy said, "What should we do? My son can't go to jail." Just like that. I was knocked unconscious by the two of them before the police arrived. That night, I was taken to the mountain and buried alive and suffocated to death. Before I died, that despicable couple was still hugging each other. "Honey. Thanks to you. From now on, we can finally enjoy a better life after all the hardships." When I went downstairs, I saw Leo waiting by the car door. I felt a wave of nausea inside but quietly dodged his hand that wanted to touch our daughter. I remained silent on the surface but was secretly calculating how to kill this despicable couple, including the bastard child they gave birth to. Suddenly, an idea flashed through my mind. People with Klinefelter syndrome have genetic defects. Most of the patients are irritable and have a strong revenge mentality. But as far as I know, people with Klinefelter syndrome can't distinguish between friend and foe. Whoever makes them unhappy, they will target that person. Thinking of this, the corners of my mouth turned up. Grace doesn't need a father who values sons over daughters and is cruel-hearted in her life. Leo must die. And he would never dream that this time, he would die at the hands of his own son. 3. The aquarium was crowded with people. This was also the reason why Leo chose to take action here. This time, I held my daughter's little hand tightly, leaving Leo with no chance to act. He tried to send me away several times but was blocked. "I'm not going to take pictures. I want to establish the 3 views of protecting animals and opposing animal performances for my daughter from an early age." "You're such a big man. Of course. You should go and queue up to buy drinks. What if I get sunburned?" Several failures made his temper a bit impatient. When he said he needed to go to the restroom, I said loudly, "You can't hide your illness and refuse to see a doctor. How many times have you been to the restroom this morning? If you're sick, you should get treated as soon as possible." He fled in embarrassment under the surprised gazes of everyone. After coming out of the restroom, he hid in the smoking area and smoked, holding a phone in his left hand. I don't know what's wrong with her today. She's sticking to her daughter like glue. How can I do it? My daughter is also a girl. Can I stop her if she wants to go in? Stop talking nonsense. Later, you take your son to play with them. I'll be responsible for stalling them. When Leo came out and tried to hold my hand, I immediately showed my disgust and said, "Your hands are so dry. Didn't you wash your hands before coming out? So dirty. I don't want to touch them." He blushed and quickly explained, "I washed them. They just got dry when I was smoking." My eyes became slightly wet. "You don't accompany the child all year round. I didn't expect that you would rather hide and smoke than spend a little more time with the child." Most of the people present were mothers. When they heard this, they all showed looks of contempt. Leo was so refuted that he couldn't save face. I didn't give him a chance to save face either. To deal with a person like him who values face above all else, I just want to tear off his mask in public and trample it on the ground. When we arrived at the venue for observing the sharks, the lights dimmed, and I held my daughter's little hand tighter. Just when my daughter was immersed in the mermaid performance, suddenly, I felt a pull. I was on guard and reached out to pinch. Immediately, a child with a wide interocular distance glared at me. "How dare you pinch me? I'm going to kill you." The woman next to him apologized repeatedly. "Sorry. Little girl. He spilled the drink on you. Auntie will buy you an ice cream as compensation." My pupils shrank slightly. The person in front of me was exactly Cindy. Her son with Klinefelter syndrome, Ryan, was still pulling at my daughter's clothes and trying to put his hand inside. I didn't give her a chance to react. I kicked her and then swung the heavy metal bag that I had specially prepared before going out and hit her. I hit Cindy so hard that stars were spinning in her eyes. I took the opportunity to shout in the crowd, "Someone is trying to abduct a child. Call the police quickly." Almost everyone present had children at home. Immediately, kind-hearted people stepped forward to subdue Cindy and Ryan, who was trying to run away. The police arrived soon. Who called the police? I immediately raised my hand. "It's me. There's something wrong with this woman and this child. They were trying to abduct my daughter." Fortunately, having fulfilled me, I was quick. Someone testified for me, it's true. I saw this boy pulling at the clothes and trying to reach inside. I frowned and clicked my tongue. Look at this boy's uneven features. He doesn't look like a good person at all. Maybe he's a dwarf who specifically comes to deceive and abduct children. Everyone present thought it made sense when they heard this. At this time, Leo grabbed my hand. What are you talking nonsense? Don't be unreasonable and cause trouble. I blinked my eyes. Honey. It was these two strange people who just touched Grace. Don't be afraid. The police will definitely enforce the law impartially. The police saluted him. Don't worry. We won't wrong an innocent person. The surrounding people. What kind of person is this? He's so afraid of trouble. If it were me, I would have slapped him twice already. He's probably a gigolo. Even a clay figurine has some temper. I think he's not a qualified father at all. How did this little girl end up with such an unreliable father? I'm being conspiracy-minded here. Could it be that he's in cahoots with them? Seeing that the speculation was getting more and more outrageous and getting closer and closer to the truth, Leo couldn't show favoritism anymore and could only agree to let the police detain them. Cindy on the ground watched helplessly as her lover let the police take her to jail, looking at her unwilling eyes. I thought to myself, if she's already so unwilling now, won't she be so angry that she spits out blood in the future? I made up my mind that since leaving them alive would be a hidden danger, I might as well send these three people to hell together. A family should be complete in hell, right? For after Leo got home, he couldn't sit still. Soon, he found an excuse and ran out. I stood in front of the window and watched him drive away impatiently. I was even more disappointed in him. Just because of gender, the difference could be so great. Perhaps it has nothing to do with the child. He's just such a person, with his despicable human nature hidden behind that decent appearance. When we got married, Leo knelt down and proposed to me in public. Among my friends, I was considered lucky. When we were in love, Leo was gentle and patient with me. And there were endless surprises. On my birthday, he would fold glowing stars, 14 of them, and put them in a star-shaped glass bottle. When I was studying very hard, he would borrow a car and take me to see my favorite concert. Without my reminder, he would prepare motherworth ginger tea in advance during my period. And there would be band-aids in his bag to prevent injuries and bleeding. When I visited his home for the first time, my mother-in-law made sarcastic remarks. He has never done such trivial things at home. Now that he's grown up, he treats his girlfriend better than his own mother. I was unhappy in my heart. But considering that he came from a single-parent family and his mother raised him alone, I didn't talk back. It was only now that I understood where that strange feeling I had back then came from. He had been a do-nothing at home for so many years. How could he suddenly become diligent and considerate? There was only one possibility. He was faking it. I was his prey. Once he got me, he started to take off his disguise and reveal his true self. I was trapped, but this time, he set his prey as Grace. Leo thought he had everything under control and showed his true colors. I'm not someone to be trifled with either. When I was at school, I received an offer from a leading company in the industry because of my excellent grades. Moreover, after a year of internship, I founded my own company by myself. In the 12 years after marriage, I built up my business step by step. I was never something he could easily possess. Maybe men are like this. They are attracted to successful and independent women, amazed by their independence, and admire their courage to act. Then they go to great lengths to marry them home. They try to make excellent women fade into obscurity and show off their achievements by having such women as if they were trophies. 5. My daughter noticed my emotional fluctuations and brought me a glass of warm milk. Mom, and he let out a low sorry. Don't be afraid. I'm already grown up and won't go with other people. Her big eyes perfectly inherited my looks. With a small nose and sweet dimples, she was a typical little beauty. Such a wonderful grace. Just because of Leo's selfish actions. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. She would have been abducted again. I couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of dread. I stroked her hair and smiled knowingly. Mom just had big emotional fluctuations today. Don't worry. I'll be fine after a good sleep. I looked into her eyes. I won't give up eating for fear of choking. And I won't stop my daughter's freedom to fall in love in the future just because I was blind and found a scumbag. I said earnestly, Grace. You have to remember. Don't look for a boy who is nice to you. Look for someone who is genuinely a good person. I saw her nodding with a look of confusion. I knew I was being a bit hasty. But it doesn't matter. We still have a long time ahead. The most urgent thing now is to get rid of Leo. Just his existence is a stain on Grace's life. 6. Leo came home looking tired in the evening. I knew he had already taken the two of them back to the apartment. So I deliberately locked the bedroom door from the inside. After he twisted the doorknob several times and found himself locked out, he immediately became impatient. Can you two stop being so troublesome? Open the door for me. When he wasn't paying attention, I picked up the vase beside me and threw it at him. With a bang. Leo was startled. What are you doing? I opened my eyes innocently. Why did you come back so late? He avoided answering directly and frowned. Why did you lock the door properly? I crossed my arms, feeling angry. Such a big thing happened today. And I was a bit scared. You went out for something. So what's wrong with me locking the door? He covered his head. All right. I don't want to quarrel with you today. Look at you. You don't even look like a woman anymore. But just as he lay down, his phone rang again. He hung up the phone impatiently. But the calls kept coming one after another. Finally, heading sigh. He raised his hand and answered. What is it? After listening to the phone call, he got up from the bed again. And I grabbed him violently. Where are you going again? Do I need to report to you every time I do something as an adult? I looked at him coldly. Grace was also scared today. Are you so busy every day that you don't even care about your child? Although Leo didn't say anything, his micro-expressions clearly showed what he meant. So what? Why should I care so much about a little girl? I can understand that your mother favors sons over daughters due to the biases of the times. But I truly can't understand you. You don't deserve to be her father. He stood there in disbelief. Stunned. After all, she didn't have an accident. I stepped forward and pressed him. So what? Do you have to wait until something happens to regret it? That's not regret. That's being shameless. Leo looked like he didn't want to talk to me. I can't do anything if you insist on thinking this way. I'm just telling you that I went out today to deal with the mother and son you wrongly accused and sent to the police station. You called the police and then ignored everything. I was busy dealing with it behind the scenes. Can you stop being so narrow-minded and sensitive? I just accidentally bumped into you. He said this so confidently that if I hadn't been reborn, I might have really reflected on myself. Because a normal person wouldn't do such a heartless thing. I sneered and went back to the room to get my coat. Fine. Then I'll go too. If anyone is to blame, it's them for not having self-awareness. They're so ugly, and yet they still get close to people. At this point, it would be unreasonable for him to refuse. Leo had no choice but to take me downstairs and drive. When we arrived at the apartment building, we saw a crowd of people surrounding the entrance. Leo ran forward nervously. Cindy was covering her forehead, which was covered in blood. Leo immediately went over and supported her. Cindy fell into his arms following the momentum. My head hurts so much. I'm so scared. Leo wanted me to help support her while he went to look for the missing Ryan. I curled my lips. I'm not a saint. Stay away from me. You're so dirty. 7. When the people around saw this, they started to criticize. Why is this person so heartless? She's bleeding like that. I spread my hands. Who dares to help someone casually in this society? What if she tries to blackmail me? Who can take responsibility for that? And this dress of mine costs several thous and yuan. Who will compensate me if it gets dirty? Don't just talk without considering the consequences. We didn't see any of you helping her before we arrived either. Seeing that I wasn't someone to be bullied, the people around gradually dispersed. Cindy was sent to the hospital. And Ryan had no one to take care of him. Leo was caught in the middle, running back and forth, and made an excuse that it was my call to the police that caused psychological trauma to Ryan. But a person with Klinefelter syndrome is just like that, highly emotional and vengeful. After Cindy was hospitalized, Leo took care of Ryan tortured him severely. Whenever the 3 meals a day were not to his liking in the slightest, he would make a big fuss and overturn the whole bowl of hot soup. He didn't wash his clothes or brush his shoes. He just bull-fed around all day long. He couldn't go to school either. I secretly investigated and found out that over the years, because of his Klinefelter syndrome, he had been transferred to 4 different schools and was eventually expelled from all of them. The teacher suggested that they could take him to a special school. But Cindy seemed to be stimulated and went to the school to abuse the teacher, accusing the teacher of discriminating against her son. My son doesn't even want to go to your crappy school. My son is so smart. It's your loss if you don't want him. When he becomes successful in the future, you won't be able to beg me to let him come back even if you want to. How can you, a person who discriminates against others, be worthy of being a teacher? It's clearly that you can't teach well. Just like that. They kept changing schools until Ryan became notorious. Dropping out of school halfway made Ryan pick up a lot of bad habits. He treated Leo the same way. He would steal all the money from Leo's pockets when he wasn't paying attention, and if he was unhappy with Leo, he would snatch Leo's glasses and crush them to pieces. The most serious time. Leo finally couldn't stand it anymore. Ryan never did any housework, and he didn't even flush the toilet. As soon as you entered the door, there was a stinking smell. After giving him a few words of education, when Leo turned around and went downstairs, Ryan pushed him down the stairs. And Leo broke his bones from the fall. Just when I thought Leo would be disappointed in Ryan, he made a move that was truly exasperating. Leo actually brought Ryan back to the villa without saying a word. I came home as usual after finishing my work. As soon as I opened the door, I saw that the vase I had specially bought in Jingdeken at the door was broken. It was a huge vase that was 1.5 meters tall. I was sure that Grace didn't break it because she had always cherished things since she was a child and wouldn't deliberately destroy them just because our family could afford to replace them. When Leo saw me come back, he commanded, "Clean out the guest room downstairs. Ryan will live in it from now on. Now you don't even need to discuss such a big decision with me. Don't make a fuss and think of it as something too serious." Leo said matter-of-factly, "After all, his mother was implicated by us. Her son has no one to take care of him now, and I'm so busy with my work. Anyway, having fulfilled my session. It's the same to take care of one child or two. It's just one more mouth to feed." I sneered. "He's pushing his luck. If I don't teach him a lesson, he won't know why the flowers are so red." "You're busy with work? After all these years of our marriage, what contributions have you made to this family?" This hit Leo's sore spot. He graduated from the art department of the school, and he was conceited and arrogant. He thought that teaching students in a training class and such things would make him too worldly. Over the years, he has insisted on creating his own works, holding art exhibitions, and selling his paintings, firmly believing that only in this way can he reflect his own value. But someone always has to bear the burden. After giving birth to Grace, I didn't dare to slack off for a moment. I worked overtime every day. And that stupid mother-in-law of mine was always getting in the way and ruining my mood. I got up at night to deal with breast milk returning, spitting up milk, and infantile convulsions. I spent one tense and terrifying night after another holding the young Grace in my arms. But in his heart, did he think that she was like a weed that could thrive just with the wind, sun, and rain? You just want to find an excuse to quarrel today, don't you? As he was speaking, Grace, who had just been outside looking at the plant she planted, came in. I could sense that Ryan's eyes were immediately fixed on her. Grace hugged me in fear, and my eyes turned cold. That annoying fly dares to covet my treasure and even show up right in front of me. Then I'll treat him in the same way he treats others. Before dinner, I urgently contacted my best friend and asked her to take Grace and stay outside. I booked plane tickets for the two of them to go on a vacation on an island. In order to cut off all possibilities of Leo and his son carrying out their conspiracy, I made another phone call. That night, an unexpected person appeared at the door. My mother-in-law. Ivy is really annoying. I didn't like her from the first moment I met her. In her eyes, there is no one more important than her son in the world. Mom, Why are you here? Oh, my dear son. You've lost weight. I told you that a woman should be virtuous. Running around all day dressed up like a peacock. She hasn't taken good care of my son and made him lose weight. My mother-in-law excitedly pulled Leo and looked at him from left to right, with that biting dog following at her feet. I smiled slightly and said, yes, hiding facile en session. Everyone treasures their own son. That's why I brought you here to take good care of him. When it was time for dinner, the four of us sat at the table. Leo looked around and asked, where's our daughter? I just saw her. Without even looking up, I said, I signed her up for an English field tutoring class. And she went to study. She just came back today to get her documents. How could you make such a big decision without discussing it with me? Leo slapped the knife and fork on the table and reached out to grab my phone to see where the child had really gone. I snatched it back. I'm just learning from you to act first and report later. What's wrong? Are you allowed to do whatever you want while I'm not allowed to do anything? You can't have double standards. As soon as Ivy saw me retort, she started shouting at the top of her voice. What are you doing? My son is the master of this house. As his wife. Is this how you talk to your husband? My son works so hard to make money. And you're still nitpicking. In the past, women like you were leftover women who couldn't get married. I stabbed a knife into the table, startling both of them. I looked up and said, as you wish. How about we get a divorce? After the divorce, you'll naturally know who's really making money in this family. My mother-in-law glared at me and said, who are you talking about? Do you really think I care? Son, let out a low sigh. Go get the divorce papers. I don't believe I can't teach you a lesson. Leo roared. That's enough. I'm already tired enough today. I don't want to hear you two arguing anymore. My mother-in-law continued to mumble. I'm doing this for your own good. She's so disrespectful and has no manners at all. You work so hard, and she doesn't show you any consideration. A daughter-in-law should listen to her elders. This is a rule passed down for thousands of years. After dinner, Ryan was playing games in the living room. Leo wanted him to be better behaved and asked if he could go to his room to play. Unexpectedly, Ryan didn't listen at all. He threw the game controller and said, get out. All of you get out. You idiots. Stay away from me. Where's my wife? You promised to find me a wife. All right. Stop shouting. I'll keep my promise. Leo stood up, but he didn't see the malicious eyes behind him. Ryan followed him upstairs like a stalker. You've been telling me this for many days. When are you going to keep your promise? Before Leo could react, he squinted his eyes and said, you and my mom are lying to me, aren't you? As he spoke, he suddenly grabbed Leo's collar, pulled it back, and tugged. Leo got caught by his tie on the nearby stairs. Soon, let out a low sigh. His face turned red and then blue. The fear of lack of oxygen and death made him struggle with all his might. My mother-in-law happened to come out with a quilt, and the quilt blocked her view. I only sleep with a velvet quilt. I'm allergic to this kind of inferior product. Change it for me. I know you have a good one on your bed. But the next second, she turned her head and took a look. She let out a terrified scream. You little rascal. What are you doing? Let go of my son. You murderer. If you kill someone, you won't be able to live either today. Let go. Ryan smiled slightly and let go as she said. So my mother-in-law watched her son fall down with her own eyes. Because of the rupture of capillaries. Leo's eyes on the ground were blood red, and there was a hint of relief in his eyes as if he had survived a disaster. Soon, let out a low sigh. He called 120. After stopping my mother-in-law from calling the police, he got into the ambulance. I clicked my tongue upstairs. Plan A failed. So it's time to activate Plan B. Leo's injury was like a thorn in my mother-in-law's heart. In her eyes, I was pushed further down the list of priorities. Although Leo didn't let her call the police. As she said, verbal education was still possible. She knocked on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning and lifted the quilt off Ryan. I've never seen such a lazy person. You eat and use my son's things in my house. How can you not do any work? Get up quickly and cook breakfast. You have no manners at all. I, an old woman. have to worry about these things. At this time, Ryan had been asleep for less than 2 hours. He got up with a terrifying expression. My mother-in-law snorted and said, "Who are you trying to scare here? I've really never met a white-eyed wolf like you who just eats and drinks for free. If it weren't for my son saying not to call the police, I would have sent a social scum like you to prison to serve your sentence." But strangely, Ryan didn't say a word. He just stared at her while my mother-in-law was talking. Soon, Leonardo will sigh. He started to cook porridge. My mother-in-law thought everything was going smoothly and went back to catch up on her sleep. In the morning, looking at the porridge on the table, I just felt nauseous. My mother-in-law criticized the porridge thoroughly. Finally, when it came to the taste, she even took a few sips with a spoon. "This is just like a pile of shit. This." At this point, she saw her eye and still smiling and said, "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at how sensitive your tongue is. You could tell it right away with just one taste." Suddenly, my mother-in-law's face changed drastically. She turned her head and vomited. I also felt so disgusted that I lost my appetite to buy breakfast. After dealing with this matter, I'm going to tear down the kitchen and rebuild it. When my mother-in-law had almost finished vomiting, he reminded her again. It was really hard to get these things. I could only find them in the toilet. They're all fresh. You know. What you made is a pile of shit. I never expected that this sentence would change from an adjective to a reality. 11. My mother-in-law's bad luck had just begun. That dog of my mother-in-law's, relying on her support, had tried to bite me several times before, and she cherished it like gold. Now the target of the dog's attack had become Ryan. At night, Ryan played games as usual until everyone fell asleep. I locked the door and windows from the inside and made up my mind that no matter what happened outside, I wouldn't go out. But at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, my door was knocked on frantically. My mother-in-law's frightened voice came from outside the door. "My Jinsey. What's that bird doing?" "Scarlet. Come out." "What on earth is he? He's so cruel." I looked in the direction she was pointing. Ryan downstairs was laughing heartily. There was a ball of fire floating around. There was also a whining sound. Upon closer inspection, it was the dog named Jinsey that my mother-in-law had raised. At this moment, it was on fire all over. No matter how it struggled, the fire kept burning fiercely. Ryan was still holding an alcohol bottle in his hand. He had stolen Jinsey and deliberately set it on fire, burning it to death. This made me realize again how terrifying people with Klinefelter syndrome could be and made me even more disappointed in Leo. This was a pervert with a sadistic mentality and a strong sense of revenge. But he was more favored by Leo, the father, than my Grace. 12. Jinsey was dead, covered in burns, and the pet hospital wouldn't even take it. My mother-in-law completely broke down emotionally and started cursing Ryan. She cursed him frantically, wishing that he would die immediately. "Why should a person like you touch my Jinsey? You deserve to be shot." My mother-in-law called to complain. Leo said he would be back in the afternoon. "All right. It's just a dog. What's the big deal? I'll just buy you another one. It's normal for boys to be a bit naughty. Don't make a fuss about it." It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. Ryan spat and went back to his room. Just when we thought we would have a peaceful night, I suddenly smelled a strong smell of burning. I took out the custom-made iron bars that were 2 feet thick and half a foot high, which I had hidden in the cabinet a long time ago. As soon as I opened the door, I saw the injection port stuffed through the crack of the door, and alcohol was spraying out. I immediately realized that he wanted to take revenge on all the living creatures in this villa. I gripped the doorknob tightly and pulled it open suddenly. A chilling scene appeared in front of my eyes. Ryan was crawling under the door of my mother-in-law's room opposite, staring with one eye and peeking. His body was in a strange twisted posture, and the smile on the corner of his mouth all showed his terror. Suddenly, he heard the sound and turned his head sharply. He slowly got up, tilted his head to look at me, and rushed towards me as fast as he could. I wanted to step back, but I suddenly realized that this was a very rare opportunity. If I didn't get rid of him at this moment, he would threaten Grace. As a mother, I have to be strong. I can't run away. My palm holding the iron plate was slightly sweating. When he ran towards me and was half a foot away from me, I used all my strength to swing the iron bar. It hit him right in the cheek. Ryan was knocked flying. His cheekbones immediately swelled up, and then two teeth fell out. He immediately took out a lighter from his pocket and threw it at me, trying to set fire to the wooden floor that had been soaked in alcohol. But I was quick-eyed and kicked the lighter with my foot. The lighter flew out and hit my mother-in-law's door panel. The fire started burning instantly. My mother-in-law, who had already been frightened, woke up. Her desperate screams echoed on the third floor of the villa. I tore off a corner of my skirt and wrapped it around my hand to prevent the iron ruler from falling off. Before Ryan could react, I pounced on him. He tried to strangle me, but I did my best to hit him repeatedly. The fire was very big, and Leo still couldn't have a good night's sleep in the end. Finally, Ryan was also burned on his thigh and sent to the hospital. In a way, this could be considered a reunion in another sense. 13 My mother-in-law couldn't believe it. What? Still not allowing me to call the police. Have you had your head kicked by a donkey? I almost got burned to death. Leo tried to explain and soothe her. But my mother-in-law, who had been frightened several times in a row, wouldn't listen to his explanation at all. I've raised a beast. You're actually trying to kill your own mother for an outsider. Mom, what are you talking about? You didn't see it with your own eyes. Shut up. I saw him burn Jinsey to death with my own eyes. How could that be fake? This is a murderer. Leo was annoyed by her. Scarlett, I've only been away from home for a few days. How have you been taking care of the house? He completely ignored my wounds and the blood on my body. What else can you do? You haven't done anything well in this family. My mother-in-law wouldn't listen to his excuses. Bah. I don't care. If you don't give me an explanation today, don't recognize me as your mother from now on. Leo stammered. I'll contact the police. Don't worry. Can you go to bed now? At this moment, someone rushed out from behind. It was Cindy, who had been in the hospital due to a head infection. She suddenly slapped me. Let's see who dares to touch my son today. You shrew. Your son is almost a murderer. He should not only go to prison but also be shot. You old hag. What are you talking nonsense about? Watch out or I'll tear your old mouth apart. It's true. I think you're promiscuous. That's why the child you gave birth to is so abnormal. Now he's brought this upon himself. I'm even going to pray to the Buddha to make him die sooner. Cindy grabbed Leo's sleeve. Aren't you going to say something? My mother-in-law was still cursing. Cindy was overwhelmed with grief and said with a sense of revenge, that's the grandson born to me and your son. This sentence stunned my mother-in-law and the police officers who had just arrived. Ding! The door of the operating room opened. And the doctor's first words were like a slap in the face to several people. The genitals couldn't be saved. But fortunately, the person survived. 14 What do you mean the genitals are gone? Cindy rushed forward frantically and was subdued by the police. You quack. You must not have treated him properly. Did this bitch give you money to play tricks? I won't let you off. I'm going to sue your hospital. All of you are quacks. Give me back my intact son. Seeing this, the doctor handed her a bag containing a bloody mass of flesh. This is the part he lost. Here you are. Looking at her breaking down, I sneered, this is karma. She glared at me furiously, shut up. Bitch. You just gave birth to a worthless little girl. What's so great about that? I gave birth to one son. And I can give birth to a second one. You'll never be better than me. You should know that the one who isn't loved is the mistress. Leo promised me that he would definitely divorce you. And I'll be a noble lady above others. And your days of being proud won't last long. I burst out laughing. It's true that I'm going to divorce him. But unfortunately, the company belongs to me alone. Because he's going to prison soon. I turned around and handed a USB drive to the police officer. This contains the records of him using his art exhibitions over the years to help with tax evasion and money laundering. I've never used or even known about the profits he obtained. So I should be considered to have made a meritorious report, and it also meets the legal requirements for filing for divorce. I can make him leave the house with nothing. Just then, Ryan was wheeled out. When he saw Cindy approaching, he grabbed her hair and slapped her several times viciously. "Why are you only coming now? Bitch? Did you deliberately play tricks on me?" There was still gauze on his eyes oozing blood, and he looked no different from a demon. His thigh was severely burned, and he was destined to be in a wheelchair in the future. I chuckled, "Leo. This is the good son you've been longing for. You two should get along well in the future." Before I left, my mother-in-law tried to hold me back and go back on her words. I slapped her hand away. Selfish people will never reflect on themselves. The only thing I need to do is never look back. Let her suffer all the hardships in the world. 15 Not long after I handed over the evidence, I was summoned to the police station again. It turned out that under the investigation of the law enforcement officers, they also discovered other major cases involving Leo and Cindy. The two of them were actually suspected of child trafficking. They failed to kidnap Grace at first, but because of Ryan's gloomy and vengeful personality, the two of them could only keep eyeing Grace while contacting human traffickers. After finding the human traffickers from the information on their mobile phones, the law enforcement agencies raided the den and rescued 3 girls, who were only 8 or 9 years old. All of them were skinny and emaciated. The procuratorate will prosecute the 2 of them. According to the charges, they may be sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve. Leo asked his lawyer to get him bail pending trial. Now, there are only 2 options in front of them. One is to obediently go to prison and stay there until they die. The other is to admit guilt and accept punishment, take all the blame on themselves or the other party, and then face their own son with Klinefelter syndrome, who has a tendency to kill. I picked up Grace and took her home, and Leo followed behind. Scarlett, can't you be less selfish? Even if our relationship is broken down, I'm still the child's father after all. Are you really heartless enough to let the child be ostracized in the class in the future? You're the one dragging Grace down now. When people are at a loss for words, they can't help but laugh. At this critical moment, he still wants to morally kidnap me. Grace stood in front of me, her small body firmly on my side. Leo squatted down. "Grace, you don't want to be called a child without a father, do you? Please persuade your mother. As long as she agrees, we can still be a happy family together in the future." He had made up his mind to persuade Cindy to admit guilt and accept punishment. But Grace shook her head. "Dad, you don't love me at all. Mom is also a woman. You're not only my dad but also her husband. Why do you want to bully her?" Then she turned around and took my hand. "Mom, let's go home. As long as you're happy, I support your decision." Then, Menno. On the day of the court session, Cindy turned against Leo on the spot and insisted that Leo had made her do all the previous things, and she was just an executor. In the face of her betrayal, the court was in chaos. Especially Leo, who originally thought he could get out in 2 years, couldn't accept it. He rushed forward like a madman. "Bitch. Why are you lying?" "Who's lying?" "I'm telling you. He not only trafficked young girls, but the first one he targeted was his own daughter. It's just that Scarlett was watching closely, so he didn't succeed. We weren't wronged when we were caught the first time. If you don't believe it, you can check. Scarlett is a CEO, and I'm just an ordinary civilian. How would I know when she takes her daughter to the aquarium?" His dark heart was exposed. Leo went crazy on the spot. "You little bitch. I'll fucking kill you. I'm innocent. I'm innocent." I sat at the back and smiled slightly, hiding my achievements and fame. Leo thought he had everything under control. I showed Cindy the intercepted surveillance footage, and sure enough, this fool fell for it. Cindy's future life is hopeless. Does Leo want to take the opportunity to start over? She will be the first one to stand in his way. 16 After coming out of the court, my mother-in-law was still waiting outside my new home and trying to come in shamelessly. I smiled with my mouth but not my eyes. "Your precious son will be sentenced soon. And our marriage is over. What are you still doing here? What are you saying? I'm your mother. Since you two got married, I'll be your mother for the rest of my life. How dare you not support me?" I stared at her for a while, and suddenly blurted out a series of numbers. 2100.3 thous, and 875.50, 1100. You came here to avoid your debts, right? But how can you be sure that I'm more reasonable than those creditors? Get out before I lose my temper. Otherwise, your creditors will show up in front of you today." My mother-in-law's lips trembled slightly, and she left in frustration. Just when I thought my life would no longer be disturbed, a piece of news appeared in the newspaper half a month later. In the picture, the bloody Ryan was being held by Cindy. Her eyes were filled with despair, but she was still stabbing the knife deeper with all her strength. "Anyway, you'll die alone in the end. So I might as well take you with me. I was blind to find you such a useless father. We'll be mother and son in the next life." Ryan didn't fall for it. Before he died, he used all his strength to scratch out Cindy's eyes. As a result, she was sentenced to death for intentional homicide and was to be executed immediately. On the day of the execution, I cooked a sumptuous dinner for my daughter. Time passed quickly. Under my management, the company grew bigger and bigger. When my daughter turned 18, the company finally went public successfully. I also became a sought-after figure in the eyes of many people. But it's just a thought. No one really dares to do anything. Because after all, I've carved out my own place in a world full of men. Anyone who's not a fool should know that I'm not as meek as I seem on the surface. To celebrate my daughter's high school graduation, I decided to go on a trip to an isle and with her. Before we entered the airport, I saw a familiar face. It was that skinny and haggard worthless guy. My daughter asked me what I was looking at. I smiled and said, "Just a beggar. It's not important at all,"